This is Lonny Grafman. Lonny is an instructor at Humboldt State University, the founder of the Activism Resilient Community Technology Program, project manager of the floating food forest in Swale, the president of the Dia Foundation, and the author of the new book, To Catch the Rain. Lonny has developed courses at universities in 4 countries and facilitated engagements around the world. He has worked on over 1,000 projects across a broad spectrum of sustainable design. Throughout all these technology implements, he has found the most vital component to be community. Today he's going to be talking about community-based innovation and harnessing the power of local ingenuity through the lens of rainwater catchment. So with that, Lonny, welcome, and the stage is yours.
Yeah, thank you. I have till 8, is that right?
Yeah, you've got the water.
I got
have a raffle and some announcements.
Okay, great.
So you're good to go.
So these are amazing introductions. I feel a little funny because I think they got something wrong. I was here to talk about pizza badge making. There's an art. Yeah, you see, like, we already have an expert here, so I've never seen a pizza badge. It's amazing. Is this? Can I select this?
Try it.
Can I try?
Yeah.
All right. Is there a plug on the phone?
There's one under each here. There's one back here.
All right, I'm just going to try this really quick because I have a lot of slides. We'll see if it, no, maybe not. All right.
One of those fish.
Yeah, I see it's flashing some. There we go. All right. I was here, I recognize some of you, I was here about 2.5 years ago, and I was talking about appropriate technology. And mentioned some projects, and this is like really just a continuation of that conversation from 2.5 years ago. 2.5 years ago, a couple of you asked me what Activism meant, because that was one of the projects I was talking about, and I was like, all right, I need a working definition. I still don't have one, but the idea is, instead of telling people what not to do, we just get crazy groups of people together to build things that people want to do. So, and we need people doing both. Like, we need, a lot of my friends are out there saying, hey, we need to stop doing this, it's bad for the planet. And then Activistas just works on building things that are easier or cooler or more fun or sexier to do. And I want to talk about a few examples of that. One of them is Swale, just as an example of Activism. The context is, in New York, it's illegal to grow public food for public use. Can't do it. It's illegal. You cannot grow public food for public use. You can have like a community garden that's private and people pay for it, that's okay. But you can't have public food for public use. Well, the water has different laws. So we built a floating food forest on the water. Right? The idea was to take a barge, these are artist renderings of taking a 5,000 square foot barge and then just filling it with food and bringing it from port to port where people could come collect food and learn about food. And so in 2016, we took this barge that was pretty beat up, converted it with a theater house and plants, and then that's an aerial shot of what we made. Thanks, and this isn't exactly what we wanted, but this is all that we could afford. Like, was this flat, what we did, we took water bladders and cut them open and filled them with soil. And so it's kind of flat, but still you got that food experience. And it worked. People loved it. We had 300 to 500 visitors a day for the whole summer. We were in the Bronx, we were in Brooklyn, Governor's Island, and then we have about 3 days a week we have free lectures, or how to collect seeds, or how to make medicines from food, or how to just cook food. It got covered by like the Huffington Post. It was in an airplane magazine, which was great because, you know, like I'm more prone to tears when I'm in airplanes. I think, I was like, oh my God, we're in an airplane magazine. It's amazing. People care. We're 21 things people need to know about. Ironically, this was in like the fall one, and we closed down in the fall. But you know, so we did. it worked. It was a prototype. Just like all design processes, we're like, okay, let's make it happen and see people like it, and people loved it. So we did what like all great projects do, and we updated our logo. I don't know if you can tell, but it looks a lot better in 2017. And so this was the new artist idea. We want hills, like people walking through an environment, and an orchard. Like people are like, you know, fruit trees would be awesome. And so we did it. Those are the artist renderings. There's some fakery going on in that because this was shot in a really cold winter season, but we had to make it look like spring. But other than that, it's pretty real. And then this is what it really looks like. You're in this immersed environment, and it's crazy because you're floating, but you're surrounded by plants, and so you see the horizon moving, and it's a little bit odd. These are some photos from when I went out and presented on Rainwater recently. That one isn't. This one is. When I showed up, I couldn't have asked for a better landing. Like I get there, I'm sitting in this house for like a minute talking to Dottie, who's sitting in the house right now. She's the leader of the Youth Ministries of Peace and Justice, and her students, her youth, take over the barge in the Bronx, so they do all the programming. They have a DJ booth. They're on there every day showing people about food and plants. And so I'm sitting on there, and a little kid comes running up to his mom right here, and he's like, Mommy, that grows from this. And he's holding a seed, and he's just totally amazed that plant grows from this. And she looks at us, and she's like, there's just not enough nature up in the Bronx. You know, and she was almost embarrassed, and like she shouldn't be embarrassed. Cities should be embarrassed for not building enough infrastructure. I think being in Humboldt, sometimes we get pretty spoiled with like we know how things grow. We might have some problems on the subway, but we'll figure that out, right? So that was covered on like. It was on Now This, and it ended up, this is an older photo, it had like 3 million views on that. And it's a whimsical project. It's not meant to be a solution. Like if our solution to the food problems and inequity of our world is to grow food on barges, we're in trouble. Like that is not, but what it is meant to be an inspiration on how we can bring nature and food back into our environments. And it moves so that we can bring that inspiration and engage in neighborhoods in different ways. So when we're in Brooklyn, it's different than when we're in the Bronx. And then also, it's New York, and so if we can have that impact on media so people get the idea of it, it's had 400 million impressions now of people actually watching it and getting ideas. And a lot of the work that we've done on these projects in New York have been done from Humboldt. In fact, we shipped 1,000 pounds of projects from here 1 year.
I'm just curious what kind of foods grow well in that environment.
It's all the food that's on there. 90% of the food that's on there is local and perennial and meant to be like this evolving food for us. So the apple even that we have on there is the only apple that's endemic to New York, which it has a name. And then we have pawpaw and all these other, some of them are hard to recognize, and that was part of what we were doing is like, oh, this is actually food. You can actually eat this, and this is how you prepare it. And then we had things that people were maybe more used to, like kale and cabbage and strawberries, because strawberries. But coastal strawberries that could handle which we also have here. Can handle it. The idea is if we can get this going for about 5 to 6 years, then most of the plants that it's planted with will just kind of be taking care of themselves. So instead of like a floating garden, it's more of a floating food forest. And so part of what we need to do is engage with like, well, how do you prepare this food that might not look exactly like all the other foods? Does that answer your question? And then we'll have a list online of like 70 of the main plants so that other people can go plant them. That was this one.
Way to be first there.
Well, let's move it. I just want to be like conscious of conscious of the time.
You got quick in 15 minutes.
Okay, cool. All right. I'm gonna move on, but if you have more questions about that, let me know. I want to talk about rainwater catchment. That's like last time I came here, I just shotgunned with everything we were doing in Arcata and Eureka. I think, and we covered Friends of the Dunes, and so now I want to talk about rainwater catchment in different places. I'm gonna, start this with why I catch the rain, and what are some reasons to catch rain?
There's no groundwater.
Yeah, because if you don't, or because you don't have to deplete the groundwater if you do it?
We water our whole household and garden with our rainwater catchment every year. It's only like 600 gallons. I mean, it fills up on a nice misty day.
Wow, so right, you know them, they're not plants. They're like you actually you use rainwater catchment to water your garden instead of, or all your landscaping, your entire property, instead of relying on city water that's imported and treated and chlorinated and energy's put into it, and cool. I don't think I could have a better testimonial than somebody in the audience of rainwater catchment. Any other reasons to catch the rain?
It falls free from the sky.
It's literally free. It's like there for us. It's like every hydrological cycle, every turn around it is renewal. It's like a fresh chance at life every single time, and taking advantage of it's kind of fun. There's a bunch of different reasons that people do it, and sometimes some of the ones I'm going to cover is just pure necessity. Some of the ones that I'm going to cover, there's this Japanese word matanai. I'm probably pronouncing it terribly, but it's the sense you feel inside when you see something wasted. And I love having a word for something because it makes it real. And I've watched people experience it. You're like, that is a waste, and there's a feeling of that. And all of this water falling on us, if you don't utilize it, it often is causing erosion to your own property, and it's also often causing a source of pollution. Instead, you could be catching it using less energy. In Humboldt, we have a lot of water, so sometimes it's a little bit less obvious. There's a couple different types of ways you can do it. The main two type are you can catch it passively, like going right into your landscaping or recharging your groundwater, or you can build a system. I'm just going to flash some scenes of how systems are built, and then I'm going to get to talking about a few projects. This is the general components of it. You catch it, you move it, you filter it, then you do this thing called a first flush, depending on how you're going to be using the water. It gets rid of the first 10 minutes of rain. It's the 90-something% of the dirtiness is in that first 10%. If you're planning, or first 10 minutes. If you're planning on drinking the water, you definitely should have a first flush. That's what it looks like. But I don't have much time, so I'm just gonna, these technical details are available online. Here's from swale. This is a filter we built from sand. That's before filtration, that's after filtration. And then also we tested it and it works really well. And we're treating not just rainwater, it's rainwater that's gone into the hull of the barge. And so it's pretty dirty. And then we're pumping it back up. On average, a house in the US catches 33,000 gallons a year. That house in the background is the one. That little house doesn't count. It's over there. Okay, that's bad. So, building, I love building systems, but what I love even more is working with crazy groups of people to get it done, which I know that Rotary knows a lot about, right? And so the way I usually do that is when I work in a community, I have no idea what I'm going to build. I don't know if it's going to be rainwater or solar or housing, or gardens or waste plastic extruders. But what we do is we have a series of community meetings that often look like that, kind of like chaos with white paper and pens around, and we run a series of what are our main needs and what are our main resources. And so this community, some people are spending up to 40% of their income on water. 40% just for clean drinking water. The ones who aren't spending that much are not spending that much because they reappropriate their electricity. They're just kind of, they go out and connect to the wires themselves with scrap wire, and then they use that with a spring to heat up their water so that they can boil it and drink the water. And so Rainwater Catchment was a deal there. This was in Santo Domingo. That community is called La Yuca de Napo, and it's the last poor community left in the center of the town. And they fought and been able to stay. So we built a small schoolroom out of plastic bottles, and then off the roof of that, we built a small rainwater catchment system. That catchment system was meant to do a few things, one of which the school was buying 2 trucks of water every month just for cleaning. And we wanted to replace that. And then also they had no drinking water. They just had to buy drinking water. And they had no hand washing for the bathrooms or flushing. The flushing happened once a night with the janitor would come and just with the water from the cistern, from the truck water they bought, would flush the toilet once a night. But no hand washing. And hand washing is a major health indicator. Like, you know, sometimes in the US I watch people not wash their hands after the bathroom, and the first thing I'm thinking is, ooh. But the second thing I'm thinking is like, we literally have clean water and soap like right at our bathroom. Like it's so easy. So, you know, wash your hands. We did it. Now the school has to buy just 2 trucks a year worth of water. And they have hand washing right in their bathroom. And then the water for the hand washing, after you wash your hands, it fills the toilet. So after every few hand washings, there's enough water to flush the toilet. So you get kind of that double reuse out of it. So that's that system. Let's look at a couple more. This is in Chiapas, Mexico. This is a group called Las Abejas Cívicas. They're like kind of a pacifist, Catholic, I'm probably doing a poor job of describing this, but contemporary of the Zapatistas. So they work alongside the Zapatistas with kind of a different, slightly different tactic. Their community was part of a terrible massacre in the 90s, and we worked together to try to create a rainwater catchment system for the community that 6 months a year doesn't have. They're collecting surface water for drinking. And waterborne illness is still a major killer of especially children around the world. This was the system that we ended up building. This is one of the houses, and that collects into this cistern here. It's a 19,000 liter cistern made from ferro cement, which is fence and concrete that you just kind of smooth on from both sides. So materials that you can find almost anywhere in the world, and build a very large system. The cool, creative aspect of this that really inspired me was that the system is actually using catchment from multiple roofs in the community, catching into this one tank, and then that tank goes to everyone in the community. It's a small community, but that type of sharing, it's hard for me to picture like that happening in most of the US where you like have like, these 3 houses are gonna catch the rainwater. We're not gonna like figure out who has how much water, and then it's gonna go to everyone in the neighborhood. But I could see it. I could see it in Arcata, Eureka. I think we should do it.
I get my roof. There you go, you got 1 roof.
Okay, all right. We also, you know, instead of, like on that roof, for instance, you can see that the materials are ones that were more available. The gutter is made from roofing material, just bent. The filter is made from an old broken bucket. All right, I want to talk about another system in Eureka. I don't know, anybody go to Zane? Anybody? All right. Zane Middle School has a garden, and that garden also has a rainwater catchment system, and there's also edible landscaping. This rainwater catchment system is meant to do a few things. The main thing was to be water for the garden and to kind of inspire kids about how you can catch water and engage in kind of the sustainable building projects. I'd love to talk more about the project, but I'm going to focus on the one thing that I think is just an amazing source of creativity. This was HSU students working with Zane staff and teachers, and they came up with something that's brilliant. And I'd never seen in any other rainwater catchment system, and I've now told a lot of people about it because I hope it shows up. That conveyance, the pipe that's going from the roof to the tank, some of you who have kids or still a kid in your mind, you're like, oh, I could use that to get on the roof, right? and that's what Zane realized. And so what we didn't want to happen was the system to break or the awning to break. So what they did is they put a flex fitting at the top there and a zip tie where it connects to the roof. And so if you reach up and grab it, the zip tie breaks and the pipe just bends down. But from the flex fitting, the pipe doesn't bend, the flex fitting bends, right? They've had to replace it 3 times in like 5 years. That's 15 cents. That's the type of like creative engagement that excites me the most, and I love working with HSU students for it because they're right at that sweet spot where they like, you know, naive enough to believe that something can happen, right? Like, and we can do this, which you need. You need that naivety or else nothing happens, right? But still with some, you know, some skills. One last one I want to throw in the examples. This one is one we just did in Puerto Rico. As you know, the situation in Puerto Rico is still terrible. Most people without energy, most people without water. We're working with a group called the Institute for Socio-Environmental Research. It's really exciting for me to work with them because they're not a technical group. Right? They just happen to be on the ground in Puerto Rico, so they understand the context, and they contacted me. I would go back to one of the slides where I was doing a rainwater talk in New York. One of the guys there is the president of the Institute for Socio-Environmental Research. And he's like, Lonnie, can you help us design something? We're paying $8,000 for a system that treats 250 gallons of water every 2 hours. And I think we can make it cheaper. So 250 gallons every 2 hours for totally clean water. $8,000. So this is the system that we designed. All off-the-shelf parts. We just kind of came up with, you know, somewhat unique, not very unique, but somewhat unique ways of putting them all together. And then they built them. And so these systems cost 1/10 for just a little bit more throughput. So 275 gallons every 2 hours instead of 250 gallons every 2 hours, and 1/10 the amount. So they're now going to be able to get clean water to 10 times more people for the same amount of money. And that was done with HSU students working on it here, and then just shipping them the designs, and they were shipping in the parts to get it all put together. That is that's kind of the some context of rainwater, some of the different ways that our students engage in this, and I just wrote my first book. It comes out this month, I hope. In fact, when I did that talk in New York, talk about naivety being like a driver of doing stuff. When I did that talk in New York, I bought that ticket for my book signing. That was going to be my book signing in New York. That was July. I didn't have any books to sign. I had like a little one piece of paper from the book that I like printed. And I was like, I can sign it, and I hear it. So it's really, really close. And I now know in the future that to like just double the amount of time I think it's going to take. I feel so lucky to get to do these projects from Humboldt. This is like my home base, and it's amazing how many just resources and input. And I've called like Ben Scurfield from Scurfield Solar. I called him from the roof in Dominican Republic one time because I couldn't figure out how this inverter was working, and he answered the phone and he's like, let me talk you through it. We have such a cool base here, and to get to see the impact that my students go and have, and now some of my students are running programs in some of the countries that we built stuff. One of our old students is doing large-scale community rainwater catchment in Mexico now. And when I say large-scale, I mean large-scale. I build projects for like 3 houses. Right? He's doing ones for like 100 houses. Crazy large-scale systems. I really appreciate your time and letting me give you the update. If you got any questions, I'm right here. I think I might be out of time, but you can run.
One question.
One question. Good. Make it good. So the key is to make sure the pizza's cold before you put it in the bag. Because otherwise it sticks to the